We're recording. Okay, so this week we are talking about resisting versus allowing. And I am, by the way, Gwenda Lambert, thank you. Ayesha Adami Magueda is going to run this show today, and I'm just going to hand it off. Go, Ayesha. Woo. Okay.
Thank you, Gwen. Always good to be here with you, my darling. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today. We are into September, the month of intention. We are going to be talking today a little bit about allowing and resisting. We talked about it last week a little bit as well when we were talking about being gentle with yourself and how to do that. And when we're talking about allowing and resisting, what we're talking about really is we're talking about how energetically we're contributing to what's happening around us. So often, Gwenda and I both talk about this from a tarot perspective and also from a coaching perspective, is that we're constantly in a state of co-creation. And how we co-create isn't just what we physically or action-wise put into things. It's also energetically what we're contributing to what's happening around us. And that has an impact on how things are created and how things arise or unfold, right? So let's say, for example, we have a difficult relationship that we're dealing with, right? One where you might be in conflict with someone all the time. You're fighting, you're always at odds, you're disagreeing with people, right? And you think to yourself, okay, no, I really want the dynamic of this to change. And then what we want to do is we want to see if what we're contributing is actually aligned to changes. What are we doing differently? And one thing that both Gwenda and I talk about also frequently is the idea of checking in with your body, to see where you're at, what you're feeling, what is your body doing. And you can really tell if you are allowing or resisting based on what your body is doing and how you're feeling in your body. So if you're experiencing a lot of stress, if you're feeling resentful, if you're feeling angry, if you feel like every time you see this person, your blood pressure starts to go up, or you feel tense, right? Then you're in a state of resistance, right? You're resisting what's happening, and you're coming at it with this idea. A lot of times we're feeling threatened, we're feeling out of control, we're feeling like there's nothing we can do in this circumstance. So all of a sudden our body goes into, as we know, fight, flight, or freeze response. And that's what we're feeling. So when you're in any of those responses where your parasympathetic nervous system is taken over, then you're in a resistance mode, right? And if you're feeling generally relaxed, if you're at ease, if you're in the situation where you're dealing with that person and your blood pressure is down, your heartbeat is regular, you're breathing easily, and you feel comfortable and at ease and relaxed, then your sympathetic nervous system is taken over, and you're more in a state of allowing. And so that's kind of an analytical way of looking at it. But if you think about also, let's say, just in terms of how you might engage someone or interact with them, if someone is questioning you about something, what happens when you're in resistance mode, right? How are you reacting to that questioning? You get annoyed that someone's asking you a question. You get defensive about what they're asking. You might shut down the conversation. You might say, no, we're not going to talk about this. I don't owe you any explanations. We don't have to go there. We're not going there. It's none of your business, what have you, right? When you're in a more allowing state, then when someone questions you, you don't see that automatically as a threat. You don't see that as something that triggers your parasympathetic nervous system. You see that as something that is going to allow you to do a number of different things. It could allow you to explain to the person what's happening and reinforce your position. So grounding you even further in what you've already decided. It could be something where you share information and that person shares other information with you. And then you make a shift. You start to collaborate with them. And then you're like, okay, this is something that's we can do better because we're doing it together. Or you could say something to someone and then they could tell you something. You could go, oh, wait a minute, that's a way better idea than what I had. And then you completely abandon what you had in place and go, let's go with your suggestion. and then you change altogether. And so allowing gives you that opportunity to make an informed choice, to make a better choice for yourself, right? Gwenda, what do you think? Have you been in that situation where you can sense in your body where you're resisting or where you're allowing something?
Well, you know what? I love the way you described it. And I've got two situations that I want to touch on. The first one, I'm going back to when I was 17 and I was taking this course called The World of Work. And the same time, my dad had been committed, right? At the same time. So this is a highly unlikely situation, but it brings a smile to my face now. So I go into this class. This guy also happened to be my photography teacher. He's very interesting. So we're talking about something, and then he goes, well, have you been tested? And me, I'm in the place of my dad's just been committed. Anybody that's got any kind of parent or anybody with mental health issues, you have to, a normal response is, oh, do I have this? Will I get this? That kind of thought process. And so this guy, I turned around, and again, I was a teenager. We do things when we know better, we do better. And I can remember turning around to him and go, what do you mean? Why would I be tested? He goes, like for vocational testing, right? And I'm like, so exactly. And this is a funny story because that actually helps me, although never perfect, we're never perfect. It's the context in which the person you're talking to is communicating with you as well, right? So as soon as he said that, I mean, I wouldn't have laughed because I was too, but as you say, in your body, like, even if he said, did you like bubble gum? I think I would have freaked out because I was on edge. And so,
right.
One of the things that I talk about in the self-defense is if you're not in a good state, you take yourself away from people. Do you know what I mean? If you're still trying to process stuff, there's like a responsibility there. So that's sort of like a funny story of what it looks like in a real life situation where we hear where our head is at, not necessarily the context in which the person coming to us. So even if you're in a place where you're feeling tense or you're feeling like your bandwidth is really strung, you've got to stop and ask yourself, do I have the energy or the wherewithal to be able to deal with this effectively? Because as we also know, sometimes we say one thing at the wrong time, and that can destroy images, reputations, relationships sometimes because people are saying things in different ways.
Absolutely.
So, and I've had that this last 3 days where I've got an emotional bandwidth that goes to here right now because I'm letting stuff happen. And because of that, I'm not having any deep meaningfuls. I'm not going there. I mean, and that's important, as you say, to understand what's going on in your body, what messages your body's sending. And the only other thing that I really loved that you put in this discussion, but I'd like to highlight, is the difference between a boundary, and that is when a boundary and where you have to give other people an explanation for whatever choice you're making. Right. And so that's basically, like, as I said, this weekend, there's literally been times where I just say to people, you know what, I'm not in a good space for this conversation. We will have it. I'm just not having it right now. And that's me honoring myself, understanding what I'm prepared to do at that point in time. But the one thing I just want to put in this is the fact that if you say no, you don't have to explain no. You don't have to explain yes. You don't have to explain. But keep this in mind too, is that, as you said, if you don't go into something with an open mind and you don't have the ability to have that mind, or something in that transaction is allowing you to see, oh man, my head's not really in this. It's up to you to take that responsibility and hopefully identify what a boundary is before any of these kinds of conversations are. Does that make sense to you, Ayesha?
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% right. And I love that you brought this up, because I am going to touch on this also a little bit later in terms of boundaries and acceptable and unacceptable behavior. But what you're talking about is really a socialized mechanism that we all use, where when we're in conversation with people and someone says something, we ask them for further information, and they feel obligated to give that. Or that happens to us, where somebody asks us and we feel obligated to tell people what they want to know. And it creating that boundary. So about allowing and resisting. So let me just kind of clarify that if someone is asking you questions that are making you feel uncomfortable, or you have information that you don't wish to share, then allowing is also about honoring yourself. It's about saying, you know what, I'm not comfortable talking about that. So I don't want to talk about that right now. Let's change the subject. Let's talk about something else. And allowing yourself that space to be safe, to take care of yourself, to be able to kind of take the space that you need to protect yourself. That is also a part of allowing. That's not resisting. Mm-hmm. So how you know the difference between allowing and resisting is that you check in with yourself. Mm-hmm. If you're feeling any kind of unease, then you're in a state of resistance. If you're relaxed, if you're kind of going with the flow, then you're in a state of allowing. And that is really the best way to know. And this isn't something that's easy, especially if you're not someone who is normally in touch with all your feelings. You're not a feely-feel kind of person. So I shared last week that Gwen, when I was in a very difficult situation over the last few months, Gwen gave me this great advice, and thank you so much for doing that, sweetheart, is she said, this is something that can change you if you allow it to. And I had to step back and think about, what does that actually look like? What does it mean for me to allow something to happen? In some ways, it meant setting up some boundaries. In some ways, it meant questioning myself. In some ways, it meant questioning other people. In some ways, it meant looking at the ideal outcome that I was hoping for and saying, you know what, I'm allowing myself to actually say, this is possibly not something that's going to happen, and I need to change my trajectory. So it means when you think about it, you make that shift change, or you start thinking about that, or you have that perspective, you can feel in your body whether it feels like the right thing or whether it feels like something that's putting your back up, right? So we want to pay close attention to what our body is telling us in that time, to really sense whether we're in a state of allowing or a state of resisting. What do you think? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you talk about the ideal outcome, because that's something that we have to have at least. You know, the funny thing is that when we get new information and we integrate it, so like we can learn a bunch of stuff, you know, all of us have gone to a seminar for 4 days where you're crammed in and stuff shoved down your throat, but you may or may not take any of that stuff and implement it into life.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think it's one of the things that I think, you know, the ideal outcome, whenever you're learning anything, is like, even if you take a conscious list of, oh, I need to implement that, and then literally put a task or do something that allows you to consciously, oh, look at this is where I want to implement this. Because again, this new learning that has just been cemented in the last month led to 3 days of ease, not painless life, but ease, because the way that I was looking at things and the way that I was now embracing information that's coming to me from anywhere, it's automatic there. But that's because I've been working on having that. So, you know, again, I know that I've been talking a lot in my tarot readings about transformation. We cannot see transformation when we're in the middle of it. So keeping the emphasis on that ideal outcome. Who is it that I'm planning to be? Who is it that I want to be? And more importantly, what can I, if for any of us, how can I help this conversation, situation, episode? Is there a way that I can make it better? If not, the next is almost, is there a way that I can make it less worse? Or, you know what, so sometimes it's not always the perfect outcome. And I think sometimes we get wrapped up in that everything's got to be Instagram perfect sort of thing, right? Like, and sometimes life is just messy and it hurts. And you have to be able to feel that and still, as you say, check in with your gut we can cry and laugh at the same time. It's entirely possible if we allow ourselves to be fully feeling. And as you say, that's exactly it, is the allowing versus resisting. When you're allowing, you know that you're safe within yourself, right? Is that almost like a way that you would put that, or what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly it. I mean, that really dovetails really nicely into, this element of how we deal with situations as they unfold, and not wanting to have that, and not hanging on to that perfection that we think should be there, right? And resisting is also when you have a situation and you want a particular outcome, and you kind of then have blinders on because you're not looking at anything else. And in some ways, when you talk about intention, there is an element of, okay, don't get distracted by anything, be very focused on what you're doing. And that's well and good. So we're not talking about not being focused or not having intention. What we're talking about is that when you get so caught up on not just what the end goal should be, but how you should get there, then you miss a lot of opportunities and signs and resources and people that could help you do it a different way. So you have either the same result you want or an even better result that you want, because you're so fixated on it has to happen this way. That's also a state of resistance. And people who are more in that allowance state, they are more confident, they're more at ease, they're more relaxed about things. When something gets in the way, when something goes wrong, they don't worry about it because they know they have that same focus, but it's a more expansive focus. It's a focus that says, I'm going to get to my goal, but let me see what else I can do along the way. It's not, I have to get to this goal to the exclusion of everything else. And that's one of the things that is problematic in our society, because a lot of people, when they have goals, it's at the expense of something else that's important in their life, their family, their relationships, their health, their spirituality, their peace of mind, their well-being. That's why there's so much focus on let's have work-life balance, because we're out of alignment, we're misaligned, we're out of balance in this area. And what we want to do is want to bring that balance right back, so that you can feel for yourself where you're resisting, where you're allowing, and you can create that space to have ease and to have confidence. And you're going to be, like you were saying, Gwen, you're going to be more grounded. You're going to be able to take that step back. You're going to think more about reflection than reaction, right? In the post, I talked about how it's not about reacting or acting. A lot of times success is about traction, which means you are grounded. You are totally grounded, and you're able to use that position to kind of flow with what's happening. So you're anchored in one place, but you're able to kind of go with the flow when things are happening. You can move with it, you can flow with it, you can sway with it, right? And then when something big hits you, you don't break. You just bend until it passes,
Yeah.
right?
Or you bob.
Or you bob. That's right. Why not? Exactly.
I mean, everything about this is perfect, as always. And I think, just to clarify a little bit more, it's the questions we ask when we go about our day to day, right? That, it is that focused intention. There's a difference between discipline, and that means I'm getting up and doing A, B, and C to move my goals forward, or to keep them top of mind, or in focus. But the other part is when we are focused on a task, as you say, does it have to be done with your left foot in the air and your right arm going, ooh, ooh, ooh? Or can it just be going, ooh? If ooh shows up, we can go with that, but if you're not in the place where, what is the bigger outcome? And because I had this, because, I don't know if it's people pleasing, I don't know what label, but I know that I never liked that in a manager. So I would have that where I would go into, I can remember, one president I was talking to, and I said, and so came up with this idea. And he just looks at me and he goes, you know what? I appreciate what you're trying to do. I don't care whose idea it is. You're presenting it to me. So, and because I wanted to be so much so, this was not my idea, but I wouldn't go in there and go, this is my idea. So like the whole thing is we have to be consistent in how we show up. That if, you know, you can still present an idea without giving everybody's insight, but it's more important, does it matter who gave the idea or the fact that the idea works? And what is your goal at the end of the day? Is your goal to create, to co-create, to make something bigger, better, brighter? Or is your goal to make sure that you tick off a box? And I think that, again, you know, one is almost like an anxiety measure coming from an anxious person, that it's like, oh, I need to make sure I'm ticking off my boxes. And the other is somebody that's in the flow, which is, you know, here's my general, here's what I'm working towards today, and putting that intention out. Because I know that you've had that situation where all of a sudden you're having a conversation with somebody that's got nothing to do with anything that was on your task list. And it's like, oh, well, this is what I'm doing. Oh, isn't that funny? I was just talking to Fred. And then you've got your solution. It's, as you said, it's way better than before. But because you're actually open and sharing, and you're open to the universe co-creating and collaborating with you, then things come from, you know, different places, right? So that's my 2 cents on that. So
absolutely. No, and that's absolutely right. I mean, it's, you know, when you're talking about the idea of intention, then the intention is to be true to what your end goal is. So you might, I'm thinking about kind of contrasting your idea of discipline with the idea of intention. So if your intention is to be healthy, you might say, my discipline is that I'm going to get up every morning at 6 o'clock and I'm going to be on the treadmill for half an hour. And that is a discipline. But if the intention is to be healthy and you're not sleeping well, or you had a bad night, or you have a big presentation to do at work, you might say, okay, I'm not going to do it today. And that is what is that? That's you being honoring your intention of taking care of yourself, because you know that if you do that 30 minutes on the treadmill, that you're going to run behind, you're going to be stressed out for the presentation, you're going to be scrambling to get to work, all those things. So you go, you know what, for my own peace of mind, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go to work, and then I'll catch up tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow I'll do an hour, maybe I'll do 45 minutes, and maybe I don't do anything because I'm not keeping score. This is about me taking care of myself, right? So when you keep the intention of something, then you're not so rigid that you have to be, you know, doing XYZ every day to this degree. And I know there are going to be people that will disagree with me and say, well, no, you need to have the discipline, you need to. And I agree, there has to be discipline, but we're human beings and we need to take that into account. Like you said earlier, things get messy, things get uncomfortable, things get, you know, they kind of go askew. And if we're not flexible and adaptable enough to go with that flow, then what happens? Somewhere along the line, we break. And that's what we want to move away from that. We want to be more intuitive. We want to be more creative. We want to be more expansive. And I use that a lot when I talk about leadership. It's about being an expansive leader rather than being a leader who is so rigid that you can't be adaptable and you can't be flexible. You want to be as expansive as possible. Right? And the other thing about allowing is that there is no judgment. And this really ties into what we're talking about. There's no judgment about right or wrong. There's no right way and there's no wrong way. There's just whatever works for you. And to be able to be flexible enough to yourself and say, you know what, I have to do what I have to do for me, and to be okay and to support yourself with that. And think about it like, you know, it's a little cliche. People talk about be your own best friend, but really that is what it's all about. Be your own best friend. What advice would you give to yourself, to someone else, to your own best friend, if they came to you with the same question? Give that advice to yourself and take that advice and give it to yourself in a loving and a nurturing way, right? There is also, in allowing, there is an element of freedom that's involved, because I don't know if you've ever experienced this, or any of you out there have ever experienced this, and we'd love to know. So if you have this experience, please write it in the comments, is that when you're in a state of resistance, there's a lot of energy. You're using a lot of energy to resist, right? Because you are constrained, you're pushing against something, you're fighting something, you're persuading people, you're arguing with people, you're pushing against obstacles. You see all this stuff that's happening and you're putting a lot of energy into pushing it away. And when you're allowing, all of a sudden all that energy gets released, it gets conserved, it comes back into you. And you, when you experience something, you don't have that level of anxiety, you don't have that level of kind of a pre-fear, if you will, right? Pre-anxiety that you're more, it hasn't even happened yet, but you're so afraid of it or you're so worried about it that it's got you all tied up in knots, right? You get to release all of that anxiety and all that pain and all that energy that's tangled up, because now you're not in a state of resistance. Now you're just letting things happen. You're observing them. You're reflecting on them. It gives you also that space, that distance from things that you need to be able to really assess what's happening, right? So if you're in a situation where you think that something should be happening in a particular way, and then you stand back and you reflect on it, you may have that opportunity, allowing that space to come up, to look at it from a different perspective, to give yourself that time away from it, that separation, that discernment that you need
Mm-hmm.
to really look at it with a clear mind and a clear heart, and see whether this is actually what you want or not, or whether you're kind of upholding the status quo of something that was already broken, right? But it's because this is the way I know it. This is what I'm used to. That you're coming back and you're just upholding it because that's what you're used to. But having that space, allowing things to kind of unfold, gives you that opportunity to look at it with fresh eyes and get a better perspective on what it is and what way you actually want to engage it and interact with it. Also, you get to decide how much you want to engage, or
Mm-hmm.
how little you want to engage, or what degree you want to engage, or how much information you want to give, or how much you don't want to give, or what kind of time you want to spend on it, what you're willing to take away. Like when you're not in react mode, when you're not in that parasympathetic fight, flight, or freeze response, it gives you the space to really think about mindfully and intentionally engaging what's in front of you, so that you actually do end up getting a result that you want. And it may look different than what you thought it would be in the first place, but you'll definitely get a better result that's going to have a better outcome for you and for other people that are involved, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I love there's so many things there that just nuggets all over the place, gold for everybody. Um, I think like the interesting thing is we can focus on something for 5 minutes in the morning, and that is, even if that's getting your head in the game and saying, okay, what are my top 3 things I'm going to focus on? And just from an NLP, neuro linguistic programming standpoint, you can, how can I move this task forward today? How can I best embrace this, whatever it is, but there can be a question that we ask ourselves in the morning that allows our mind and the universe to fill in the blanks. We don't have to know everything. And I think that's really key, especially with leadership too. When you're talking about leadership, sometimes people aren't having good days. Do we know what's going on? Do we know if they've had, some sort of something happened at home because their life isn't all, and never mind, we're COVID world. So who knows what their kid just did, or if the dog just threw up on their paper. I don't know. But I mean, I think it's really important, especially as a leader, to I've had this discussion before with different levels of management. Well, people should do what I say because I asked them to, and there's got to be a line enough between, is what you're asking unrealistic to begin with, and this is also, I'm all about the rubber bands, though. I'm all about the fact that we are malleable, and sometimes we don't know our own limits until somebody else pushes them, because in a lot of cases, we will regard somebody else's expectation of us compared to, and I was just talking about this. I was just talking about it yesterday, that it's easier sometimes to meet objectives or to make changes when it has to do with somebody else expecting it of us. And the big shift is when we get it where we expect stuff of ourselves, and that takes priority over what other people's agenda is. And it doesn't mean that you can't collaborate and coexist. But exactly as you were saying, if you're coming from you being the powerhouse, from you being the generator, from you being the creator, the co-creator of what's going on in your world, you also have to be able to take that focus and not have it so that it's all outside of you, that it is inside of you. And that's what I love about everything that you've talked about, is being in touch with what's going on in your body, knowing your bandwidth. Because, and I think the other really important thing that you talked about is that taking care of yourself can mean half an hour on a treadmill, but it can also mean resting when you know that your body's not resting as well. And both of those things matter. Both of those things matter. It's when we don't get out of bed every morning for a week. That's when there's a problem. One day is not, in fact, getting to the point where you can be the master of your own destiny, the master of your own ship, and go, you know what? I'm going to walk after work tonight. Or maybe instead of that lunch, we'll walk back from wherever we're going, because people are going outside now. So pick a restaurant that's close and walk back the half an hour. You know, again, it may be taking from Peter to pay Paul. In other words, you're taking it out of the middle of your day and you're going to do some extra work at the end of the day. But I think that intention, as you say, is really important to also know that caring for yourself is more than just ticking a box on a list, that it's actually listening to your intuition, listening to your body, listening to the message that it's giving you, and saying, okay, I'm going to pay attention to what you have to say to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it really does. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that, you know, what you're highlighting here is you're highlighting the importance of being intuitive and to not shut down from your emotions so that they can guide you. Because they're, you know, it's something that when you say it to people, people just go, that can't be right. Is, you know, let your emotions be your guide. But in a lot of ways, it is very true. When it comes to those of us who, you know, have spent lifetimes battling with our weight, we have this idea that we have to work it off,
Mm-hmm.
that we have to suffer so that we can lose the weight, so that, you know, we have to get to the gym, we have to, you know, watch what we eat, we have to do all those things. And what I learned when I lost a bunch of weight many years ago was that actually our mentality is just as important, if not more important. Our mindset is just as important, if not more important, than what we're doing on the treadmill. Because when you're stressed out about your weight, your body produces a lot of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. It hangs on to all the fat. It hangs on to all the weight, right? So you could do 100 different things, but if you're constantly getting on the scale and looking at it, you're constantly counting calories and it's stressing you out, you're not going to lose weight. It's just not going to happen, or it's not going to happen easily. And as soon as you let go, it's all going to come back, right? So this is about actually changing your mindset. And that is what we're really talking about at the core. It's about allowing versus resisting. It's about letting yourself be guided by your intuition and trusting that you're making the right decisions. It's also giving yourself permission to change course. You don't have to stay on course, especially if you can see that what you're doing is not going to get you where you want to go. You don't have to stick to it because, oh, I said I was going to do this and now I got to stick to it. No, it means you have that flexibility. You're allowing yourself to do a pivot or do a shift or do a complete redirect or completely stop what you're doing and say, you know what? I have too many obstacles. I'm always getting delayed. People are resisting me. Things keep coming up. Everything gets complicated. If it's too complicated, there is a reason why it's too complicated. It's because it's not meant to happen in this way, right? So it's better if you allow yourself to receive that message, back off from it, because sometimes it's also timing.
Yep.
Sometimes the timing is off. Sometimes you need to give it a few days, a month, a year or something before you come back to it. And then you're going to look at it with fresh eyes as well. So it's allowing yourself is another word for taking space, for trusting that whatever is happening for your highest good, right? And giving yourself that flexibility to say, okay, well, if this isn't working out the way that I wanted it to, maybe I'll turn my attention to something that is a little easier. The best way you know that allowing is working is that you're going to see it's the path of least resistance. Everything will fall
Mhm.
into place. It just comes. Things happen easy. Resources come to you, people come to you, ideas come to you. You get the ball rolling, the momentum builds, and away you go, right? So you can tell also allowing means that when the universe is telling you to stop, then just stop.
Mhm.
Just stop, just scale back, right?
Mhm.
And what I love about this is that about allowing and resisting, what I've learned about it is that your inner self, your inner being is very intuitive and very responsive. It's a barometer and it's a guide on
Mhm.
how we can interact with the world around us, right? And when we start tapping into that inner compass, and it takes time to get into the groove of this, but when you tap into that, then you you start to have a flow and and a rhythm that helps you to navigate your life better, less stress, more ease, more confidence, more trust, more openness, more open-heartedness, better relationships, deeper relationships. And because you're not focused on the goal all the time, you you enjoy the journey more,
Yep.
right? And those are the things that are the benefits of being in that state where you can recognize when you're allowing and when you're resisting. And I'm reminded of the lyrics from Leonard Cohen's song, The Anthem, where he talks about this. He says, "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in."
Mm.
And it's all about cracking open, letting yourself be messy, letting yourself be human, letting yourself just be. And that's where the light's going to come in and where you're really going to let yourself shine.
Mhm. Oh, you're making me cry. It doesn't take much today, but still. So that's boy. Okay, look at us. We're already like 40 minutes in. I love
Oh,
it. Like the good old
there
days,
we go.
right?
Yeah.
But, I think that again, as I said, like I've just spent like literally days where it's like I'll talk about this when I can. I'm just not talking about it now. And I think it's, when we actually start treating ourselves like we matter to us, it's amazing how clear it's like having that WIIFM. What's in it for me? You're not totally on that radio station. You're still getting static. So you have to still keep tweaking it, right? But as long as you're doing that, then it's like, okay, the universe is going, okay, I'll, you know, and I think the one last thing that I'd like to throw in here is the fact of not wanting something to happen is not the same as having a and it's not positive and negative. This is not the toxic positivity we've talked about. It's I love weighing 160 pounds instead of I'm losing 30 pounds. There's a difference. What does it feel like when you weigh that 160 pounds? That's my little target, right? So but it's and the thing is that then I end up doing stuff that I didn't even know was a thing, and it's really about me and chocolate. Let's just talk about it. But it's okay to also have that chocolate if that's what you need at that moment, as long as as long as whatever it is that's a distraction, as long as it's only a distraction for a short amount of time and it's not something that becomes your life, then you gotta listen to yourself, right? So
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And this is really about connecting to our inner compass and our inner selves. When we are connected with our inner compass, we know when we're eating for enjoyment versus eating to self-soothe. We
yes.
know it. We already know it, right? And when you're connected to that inner compass, that allows you to make choices with intention,
Yeah.
right? So you can intend to enjoy a piece of chocolate, or you can intend to soothe yourself with chocolate. Again, there's no judgment,
No.
right? There's no judgment. You do what you need to do, and then you let yourself be in that space, and you go, okay, today I soothe myself with chocolate. Tomorrow I'm going to soothe myself by listening to some music that I like, and it's okay. And don't beat yourself up. It's all right. right? It's just about being easy with what you're doing. And the other thing too, same as about not beating yourself up, is this is not about accepting unacceptable behavior from other people when other people are behaving in inappropriate ways. This isn't about, I have to allow it, I have to accept it. No, it's about recognizing what's happening on their end and then choosing how you're going to engage with it, right? So if someone is used to, going back to the difficult relationship analogy, if someone is used to arguing with you all the time, it might be in the past that you just shut down and you just didn't want to have those conversations, but you can also choose intentionally to walk away from a conversation because you know that there isn't going to be a good outcome from it, because you're making a choice to step away from it, but you do it without judgment, you do it without malice. That's a different thing than shutting down because you're in pain.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're empowering yourself to make a choice. You're making that choice and you're choosing it intentionally. It becomes a different thing. You're easier in your body. You feel better about it. You're not walking away in constraint and in anxiety and parasympathetically triggered. You're like, oh, you know what? I don't think that this is a conversation that I want to engage. So I'm not going to engage it. I have to go now. We can talk another time. And you leave, and you're leaving, and your body and your mind is in a different state than if you had shut down and left that conversation. So it's about intentionally making choices and letting your inner compass guide you.
Exactly. Oh, you're beautiful. So what do we have on the slate for next
Thank
week?
you.
What's
Next week.
And the next week.
Yes. So next week we are going to talk about being in flow. So we're going to talk about what that feels like to be in flow, how to know you're in flow and how to get yourself in the flow, and to also understand that being in flow, like you were just talking about with toxic positivity, we're human beings. We're not meant to be in a static state all the time. We're not going to be in flow all the time.
No.
Things are going to ebb and flow. So when you fall out of flow, how do you get back in it? So we're going to talk about that. And then for October, we are going to be talking about clarity. So we're going to have clarity in all different areas of your life. So we're going to talk about that.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for manning the helm today. Well, we share it anyway. So
absolutely. Personing the helm.
Personing the health. Oh, didn't even see that one coming. Thank you so much.
Personing the helm.
So yeah. So thank you again. And thank you for anybody that showed up and watched this today. And I hope we've given you something to think about, a focus to maintain, because we are all in this together, but separately, right?
That's right.
We need to be, we are the only ones that can really tell the difference between us pushing ourselves and us allowing other people to break our boundaries. So I think that's really important. And self-awareness is never a skill that goes out of fashion.
That's right.
It's always something that brings us deeper connections, all the stuff that you said. So thank you, everybody. Thanks to my darling Ayesha, the best co-pilot a person could have.
And likewise, my love. Thank you.
And we shall see you next week on Just Talking. Okay.
Just talking.
See how
bye, everybody. Comment. Tell us what you think below.
Yeah, comments. Let us know. Send us your stories of a time where you may have done this, right? Where you've taken anything that we were just talking about and it worked for you. Hopefully it wasn't as embarrassing as the world of work and have you been tested, but there you go. Okay. Much love, everybody.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.